Hey everybody, did you know that markets and capitalism increase innovation and keep people motivated so that we're always having new products and people feel motivated to keep going back to work? Because in my video where I talked about why Walmart shows that planned economies are way more efficient than, market economies, a lot of you said that to me. Competition drives innovation and motivation, and that's why millions of people have to starve. It's just basic economics. It seems like every economics 101 textbook is like, chapter 1, if I have a lemon and you have $1, you can pay that $1 for that lemon, and it is a mutually beneficial exchange. And then chapter 10 is like, and this is why we had to kill several thousand people in South America to keep the price of bananas low. It's like, okay. So again, the idea that competition breeds innovation and motivation is a thing that we consider a sort of economic truism, something that just is assumed to be true. We don't interrogate it, we don't investigate it, we don't say why we believe this to be the case, we just assume so because Cold War propaganda told us so. And I got a lot of comments on my planned economies video about how, yeah, Walmart's a planned economy on the inside, but Walmart exists within a market economy, and they would not have been driven to think of all of those innovations in logistics, and they would not be motivated to keep producing profit if it wasn't for the fact that people who are poor starve to death or whatever. And as we all know for a fact, undisputed, that the Soviet Union was full of people who never worked. They weren't threatened to starve to death if they didn't meet their quotas. Therefore, they just sat in their factories and vibed all day. So the lesson for today, children, is that market economies and competition actually hurt innovation and impede motivation. Let's dig in a little bit, shall we? Hi, I'm a simpleton, or maybe even a moron, and this is Tristan Won't Shut Up. So the main thing that drives the capitalist economy forward is that incentives are driven through the profit motive, or if you're a wage worker, the financial incentive. I think you probably heard the story before about how this works. You take a third of your day and sell it for money. And by doing so, you receive money that is used to buy things so that you live. As soon as you dig into like behavioral science and psychology and data, you start to see that this stuff breaks down. For example, deciding that financial incentives are good and probably the best way to get people to be motivated to work shows itself to actually not be the case. In fact, in a lot of experiments, financial incentives can actually decrease one's motivation. So rewards like money do work to a certain extent. What it creates is something called temporary compliance. You can temporarily keep somebody motivated in a job or a task by giving them a financial incentive. For example, you could pay someone to turn a crank for 8 hours, and that would work for a day. But if you want to keep that person willing to come back, motivated to keep working day after day, to put in those extra hours, to think of new innovations to keep the thing running, financial incentives actually hurt with those. And studies that try to show financial incentives and rewards like that in creating commitment and habits show that actually rewards are a worse option than doing nothing at all. And so looking at the data, what does increase motivation? There has been tons of research to try and figure out what can we do to get people to be motivated about tasks. And one thing that works really well is group identification. If you can make a person feel like they are part of a team or part of a group that is doing something important, they are way more committed to the cause. For example, workers for organizations that are, say, doing nonprofit work, activism, things like that, tend to have way more motivated employees and also volunteers who work for literally nothing, while a for-profit widget corporation has extreme problems getting people to be motivated to keep making them widgets. Because it seems the number one way to keep people motivated is to have them realize that what they're doing is making the world a better place. You know, that whole mutual aid thing that Kropotkin figured out like over a century ago. And so the two things that drive up effort, and this is just at like the lowest skill. We haven't even gotten into like creativity and innovative parts yet. But like in the absolute just pure labor happenstance, to keep them motivated, they have to feel like they're contributing to something greater than themselves in a good way. There is one sort of short circuit of this though, which is that financial incentives really do work for motivation on, as I said, non-innovative tasks, but only if the person is in a financial situation where they are desperate for money. Which means that, yes, you can motivate people to work with a salary, but only if that salary is the thing keeping them alive. Which is sure a recipe to keep people, you know, working hard at their jobs, but is sort of evil. Now that is like labor work. When it comes to like intellectual labor, when it comes to innovating, thinking of new things, trying to find problems to solutions, financial incentives also don't work. Studies that look into the intersection of innovation and financial incentives show that, again, being motivated by just making a better widget doesn't work as well as following through on someone's passions. People who work in innovative fields tend to be very interested in solving hard challenges and put them together in a room together and give them hard challenges that they have the expertise to figure out the answer to. I know that sounds really simple and it should be like no-brainer, but a lot of tech companies and a lot of corporate environments that try to get innovative tasks out of their creators tend to rely on like giving people financial incentives if, say, they think of a new innovation. You know, if you come up with a solution to an idea, you might get a little bonus, for example. And what that does in the environment of a group of creatives working on different types of, you know, problem-solving solutions and trying to invent new things is that it leads to competition. The people guard their ideas. They don't collaborate. They don't work well with each other because they're trying to solidify their bonuses. While situations where teams of people are just allowed to solve problems working together as a team and have a sort of autonomy over what they're doing, we'll get to that a little bit later, you actually find that innovations go way, way up. So let's dig a little bit deeper and try to figure out what actually gets people into the mood for innovating and to thinking of new solutions for things. It seems that your ability to problem solve, to be creative, to innovate is stymied pretty heavily when you feel like you are not in a materially secure position. So wages need to be kept at a level that this person is not worrying about where their next meal or the next rent check's coming from. The second is autonomy over what they're working on. If they have more control over what problems they're solving or how they approach things, you tend to have more innovative and creative employees. And to sort of find a connection between those two, chocolate and peanut butter of innovative thinking, you come up with essentially the solution being that people need to be intrinsically motivated in order to put their all into something or to think of novel ideas. So intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are a psychological term for trying to understand why people do things that they do. Intrinsic motivations being that the act of doing what you're doing is what's motivating you. You are doing the thing because you want to be doing it, versus an extrinsic motivation where there is some sort of reward or punishment that is not related to the task that you're doing, that is trying to incentivize you towards what you're doing. And as I mentioned, except in the situation where you are extremely desperate, intrinsic motivations are way more galvanizing than any extrinsic motivation. That's why a lot of capitalists don't like to give their labor workers control over their own work, and most definitely don't want them to be paid well, because if they are kept in a desperate situation, they are going to be motivated to work because they're basically, riding at the razor's edge between life and death by the paycheck they take home every 2 weeks. And if you're in that situation, you're in a shitty job. And trust me, I don't need to tell you if you're in one, you'll know. The people who do this kind of work and are kept in this precarious position tend to be the people doing the most important work for keeping our world running, we sort of have this paradoxical way of valuating work in our economy, where the people who do the most important labor, the people who keep society functioning, are paid the least, while the people who do arguably the least important work are paid the most. Hence why when the pandemic went down and productivity went down in a lot of the sort of service worker economy, because people were working from home and all sorts of transitions were happening, they made explicit orders to keep the essential jobs going. These are jobs like frontline workers, these are jobs like even people in primary resource extraction, all these kinds of things that are basically essential for keeping the economy running. If you noticed, a lot of those essential workers were some of the worst paid people in our economy. And because of capitalist logic, we couldn't, pay them what they're owed for, keeping society running so that people like me can sit around and make YouTube videos. Instead, we decided to make pictures like this one where the Marvel superheroes or superheroes in general are bowing to the frontline workers, or all those Twitter posts about, we love our essential workers. Not enough to give them money, but, we respect them. Respect essential workers juice mug. So that's all well and good. Everything is topsy-turvy. Capitalist economy is a hellish nightmare that we never wake up from. Typical fare on Tristan won't shut up at this point. But dude, you're just spouting theories, man. Don't you have any facts to back up your feels? And I kind of do, especially in the innovation sphere, and it comes from Google. Google is a software company that owns the channel I'm on, and they are a company that needs a lot of people who have unique ideas and are really good at problem solving, because, it's full of coders and people who want to develop all the new Google products they're going to cancel next year. So, at Google's development hive in California, they tried to see what they could do to motivate their coding workforce to think of new ideas, to do bug fixes, things like that. And the first thing they tried was a financial incentive. They tried to give you a bonus. If you found a particularly impressive bug fix, if you thought of a new feature or a new product, you got yourself a big bonus. Middling success. But they tried something else that turned out to be gangbusters more successful. One day a week, these Google employees were not told what to do. They had to show up to work. They did have to work, but they weren't told what they needed to work on. They were basically free to work on anything they wanted. Pet project, bug fix that they were meaning to get around to, anything they want. And what they found was that this day started to become the most productive day of the week for the company. Way more bug fixes were being made. Way more product features and prototypes were being put together. And it became sort of the core of the success of a lot of Google's more innovative ideas, except for maybe Stadia. I don't know who's to blame for that one. So that's all talking about financial incentives. We haven't talked about competition. The other, negative comment I got on my video. Competition is supposed to make everybody more innovative and more motivated, more successful, right? Well, competition has also been studied quite a bit. And it turns out that if you are in a situation where there is a cooperative work environment versus a competitive work environment, overwhelmingly, you get better ideas and more motivation from the cooperation angle. Remember how I told you about how one of the most successful strategies that groups like research labs and things like that have used to foster new ideas has been to get their best minds just working together on projects? Yeah, it turns out cooperation is a way more successful strategy than competition. This doesn't just bear out in different work environments, it also bears out in nature. For example, a social structure in animals that seems to be by far the most successful is eusociality. Species like ants and bees and termites have sort of taken over the world because they're extraordinarily successful by having these extremely cooperative almost to the point where you can consider like a hive one member of a species. Or the fact that humans learning how to communicate and cooperate with each other is sort of responsible for us becoming the most quote unquote successful species on the planet by basically breaking evolution. And if you want to go really abstract, the fact that I am a cooperating mass of cells that are extremely interconnected and building a machine, trillions of items large, to keep possibly one of the most complex mechanisms in the world going instead of being a single cellular paramecium, also is a testament to the power of cooperation over competition. And fairly often in areas when it comes to innovating and thinking of new things, competition tends to hurt stuff. The number one example I would say are trade secrets. Think about how we have to constantly rediscover and retread and re-research the exact same things over and over again because one company developed a technology, and because they want to keep their trade secret, they don't share what they learned. So company B has to spend tons of resources re-researching the exact same thing in order to maintain their competitive edge. It's a humongous waste of resources. So if you didn't need to be reminded, capitalism and competition and keeping people at the edge of a knife between starvation and survival is bad, my dudes. Capitalism is not the superior system. It does not foster innovation. It does not foster motivation. It keeps a lot of people motivated by keeping them desperate, and it impedes innovation and technological development because the incentives are all towards keeping things siloed and away from people in order to not lose a competitive edge. Not to mention that there's like a whole industry of people buying innovative new ideas and then just crushing it and deleting it and just erasing it from the world so that they just don't have to compete with it. So yeah, it does turn out that capitalism, a system developed in the early modern period in order to have a rational justification for slavery and colonial conquest, turns out not being all that good. It's just an ideology designed to justify taking the richness and resource of this world and funneling it more and more into fewer and fewer hands. And every time we have a major crisis like a pandemic or something, we try to approach the problem by using market incentives, competition, and capitalist logic, and it results in things always sucking. I'm looking at you, cap and trade. See, I'm a simple man. I just want a world where everyone feels comfy, you know? I want a world where people are generally happy and they're not feeling constantly anxious about whether or not they're going to be able to afford their next meal. I want people to have a job where they feel excited to be going to it in the morning, and that when they get there, they feel like they're part of the group, that they feel like they are contributing to making our world function and making it a better place. And if only I had a label for what that would be called. Oh yeah, that's communism, baby. By the way, if you want some more evidence that cooperation beats competition pretty much all the time, I would highly recommend this video I made recently on planned economies and how Walmart basically won by becoming a planned economy. So watch that and come back next time for more. Just won't shut up.